Once upon a time, in a small village, there was a wise teacher named Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee was known for his wisdom and patience. He had many students, but one of them, named Jack, was very foolish and lazy. Jack always thought he knew everything and never listened to Mr. Lee. One day, Mr. Lee decided to teach Jack a lesson. He called Jack and said, "Jack, I have a special task for you. Take this empty jar and fill it with the biggest rocks you can find." Jack thought this was an easy task. He went outside and found some big rocks. He put them in the jar until no more big rocks could fit. Jack went back to Mr. Lee and proudly showed him the jar. Mr. Lee looked at the jar and smiled. He said, "Well done, Jack. But do you think the jar is full?" Jack replied, "Yes, teacher." The jar is full. Mr. Lee picked up a bucket of small pebbles and poured them into the jar. The pebbles filled the spaces between the big rocks. Mr. Lee then asked, "Now, is the jar full?" Jack was surprised but said, "Yes, now the jar is full." Mr. Lee smiled again. He took a cup of sand and poured it into the jar. The sand filled the tiny spaces between the pebbles. Mr. Lee asked Jack once more, "Is the jar full now?" Jack was amazed and said, "Yes, now it is really full." But Mr. Lee was not done yet. He took a glass of water and poured it into the jar. The water filled the spaces between the sand grains. Mr. Lee then looked at Jack and asked, "Is the jar full now?" Jack nodded and said, "Yes, teacher. Now the jar is completely full." Mr. Lee smiled and said, "Jack, this jar is like your life. The big rocks are the most important things, like family, health, and education. The pebbles are the other important things, like your job and house. The sand is the small stuff, like hobbies and fun activities. If you put the sand or pebbles in first, there will be no room for the big rocks. Always remember to put the big rocks first." Jack understood the lesson. He realized that he had been focusing on the small, unimportant things in life and ignoring the big, important things. From that day on, Jack started to listen to Mr. Lee and focused on what really mattered in life. Jack became a hard-working and wise student. He learned that wisdom comes from understanding what is important and making time for it. He also learned to respect and listen to his teacher, who always had valuable lessons to share. Years later, Jack became a successful man. He often thought about the jar and the lesson he learned from Mr. Lee. He shared this story with others, teaching them the importance of focusing on the big rocks in life. Thank you for watching our story. We hope you enjoyed it and learned an important lesson. Remember, like the jar, our lives can be filled with many things. It's up to us to make sure we focus on the big rocks first, our family, health, and education. When we do, everything else will fall into place.